delighted to have a number of people with us. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen and give you an introduction to who's with us. And I will hopefully have no issues with tech. No, do you know what? My screen does not want to share. So I will quickly introduce who's on the panel, and when we come to our panel discussion, there will be slides that will give a little bit more information. So on the top of my screen, I've got Vicky O'Neill, and she's joining us from Ibec today. I've got Brian Crooke then in the middle of my screen, and he is joining us from Workwell Ireland today. And Audrey too, who's joining us from National Lottery. And National Lottery has just completed the 6-step pledge with Sea Change. So they've been doing a lot of different work around mental health in the workplace. So we're really hoping that between those three professional voices that you're going to hear a lot about what organisations can do from a perspective of mental health in the workplace. We also then have Lucie Kavanagh, who's one of our Sea Change ambassadors, and she is graciously sharing her own story today in relation to mental health and judgment in the workplace. So I'm going to just try again with the screen share, and let me see if I can save now. Isn't that always the joy of tech? So that looks like it's sharing. Yes, awesome. So now we can officially start our webinar. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides with you just to go into the content a little bit and what we hope to discuss today and the kind of things that we want people to be more aware of. Give you a little bit of information about me and who Sea Change are. I'm the Sea Change team leader, and I'm very interested in disrupting discussions around mental health and particularly talking about stigma and discrimination. I'm a suicide survivor myself, and that's where my passion comes from, and I've been working in this area for 13 years now. You can find out more about Sea Change at the Sea Change website, that's seachange.ie. To tell you a little bit about our organisation, Shine is our parent organisation, and they support people affected by mental ill health. You can find out more about everything that Shine does on the Shine website, that's shine.ie. And then our sister project, Headline, supports the media around responsible reporting for stories around suicide and mental health as well. And again, that's headline.ie. So when we're thinking about mental health judgment and the importance of diversity and inclusion and why we need to have these conversations, it's really important to understand both sides of the conversation. So what we're hoping today is to have a discussion from a workplace perspective in how we can support employees, but also from the employee perspective in the best case scenario. If we were to remove stigma and to remove that mental health judgment, what could it be like? So we're really hoping today that we can do some of that preventative measures after the discussion that we have, and that we can all say, well, you know, maybe it's not my job because I'm not HR, or maybe it's not my job because I'm not a team lead, but actually it's my job because I'm part of this community, I'm part of this organisation. So every single one of us have something that we can do to help end mental health stigma, discrimination and judgment. If you want to find out a little bit more about workplace research, we do have a guide. It's Mental Health Matters there on the screen. It's downloadable on our website in the publications section, and we can also send them out in the post to you as well. You can email us at admin@seachange.ie for that. For everybody who is on the call, this video will be going up on YouTube afterwards, and we can also share the slide deck with the participants. That's absolutely not a problem. So thinking about some of the numbers that we need to be aware of from the research that we did, and this is again in the Mental Health Matters Guide, 1 in 5 workers believe that mental health stigma is still existing in their own workplace. So that's quite a lot considering how much we've been talking about mental health, particularly in the last couple of years. 2 in 5 workers have witnessed some kind of stigmatizing behaviour. So again, when we're thinking about stigmatizing behaviour, it might be that somebody has been excluded, it might be somebody who has been treated differently or more negatively, it might be somebody who was passed over for a promotion or left out of project work. So there's lots of different ways that stigma can show up, and again our guides can go into more detail on what that looks like. The thing that really struck me from our research, and I'll be honest, when we got this information back, I found it deeply upsetting that 7 in 10 workers are still concerned about disclosing a mental health issue. So when we think about talking about mental health, we're okay talking about other people's mental health, we're okay talking about celebrities, we're okay talking about the topic, But when it comes to me and my mental health, and it's about actually, I need to go and have a discussion with my manager or with my colleagues, 70% of us are still fearful and are still saying, actually, I don't think I want to do that. So this is why these conversations are so incredibly important. So again, thinking about some of those kind of statistics, 40% of people are thinking about being judged or labelled. We have 26% who are worried about the impact on their job progression, 35% saying that they feel they'd be treated differently, and 21% still feel that others don't understand. So this is when we're starting to get to the heart of what does the impact really look like? And this is why we really encourage people to have more conversations like this and find out what it is we can do. However, we also found out that people thinking about people who have experienced mental health difficulties and live with mental illness have different coping skills. And that's 50% of people think that people who have experienced a mental health difficulty have better coping skills. They also have higher resilience and empathy. So there are lots of positives that people have experienced and the tools and the tips that they have learned by going through these difficulties. So it is about understanding that it isn't all negative, and it is possible for people to live with mental illness, and it is also possible for people to recover. So hopefully today we're going to have a slightly different conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel properly now. So we've got Brian Crooke. So Brian is a wellbeing educator, speaker and advisor, empowering Irish organisations to promote and sustain wellbeing within their workplaces. He's the founder of Workplace Wellbeing Ireland, the community, and is course director for postgraduate certificate in workplace wellness in Tangent, Trinity College Dublin. He also hosts the Work Well podcast. He recently launched the Work Well Institute, a learning hub for workplace wellbeing training and education, which includes Brian's 8-step framework for developing a workshop wellness program that lasts. Brian, do you want to, I'm going to stop sharing. Do you want to jump in and give us a minute or two, just telling us a little bit more about what you do and, you know, why this conversation is important to you today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Barbara, and thanks for the invitation today. Real privilege to join everyone on the session. So yeah, so I'm in the privileged and lucky position to, I lead a community called Workplace Wellbeing Ireland. We have over 4,000 members. It's effectively, it might be HR, wellbeing leaders, wellbeing champions, mental health advocates, people in organizations that are passionate about wellbeing and about making their workplace, you know, a healthier, a psychologically safer place to be. And it's a forum for sharing and learning, completely free community events, webinars, the podcast that you mentioned as well, a weekly newsletter, and we just kind of share information. We learn from each other and we share information. And then again, privileged position to lead the postgrad in workplace wellness at Trinity. And I see some of the students on the call today, which is fantastic. So yeah, so just it's really kind of education and sharing and learning. And I'm the number one learner. I get to learn from all the students. I get to learn from all the members as well every single day. So I feel very grateful for that.
Thanks a million, Ryan. And I think it's amazing to hear about all of the free resources that you have. And I think that's the thing that organizations need to understand, that actually investing in wellness, and particularly in mental health, is a lot easier than it used to be. And like that, there are loads of free things that people engage with, and also fun. So that, you know, the like of the different offerings that you have are really easy to engage with, whether you like to see something visual, you want to hear something, or you want to be in person. So thanks a million for highlighting some of those. And again, we will be sending out information about the speakers, and all of the links will go out after this call as well for anybody on the webinar. So thank you very much for your introduction.
Thanks,
so Vicky, I'm going to come to you next. So I'm just going to share my screen for a moment. So Vicky is a HR strategist and specialist from Ibec, and I've realized that isn't sharing, just for a moment. I'm also having terrible mouse trouble, and I'm talking about my lovely mouse rather than the furry kind. So hopefully that's come up on the screen for you now. So Vicky is has a human-centered approach to work design in the current climate is implicit. A mapping out of, sorry, I'm going to start again because I'm getting totally tongue-tied, and you know what, I'm actually kind of amused because we were talking about this before. It doesn't happen very often. This is mental health in action. So Vicky, A human-centred approach to work design in the current climate is implicit. By mapping out the moments that matter to consciously curate culture, enabled with the right technology, we can enhance working lives and positively shape the future of our communities and economy. Vicky has joined Ibec as our member HR strategy specialist. Prior to Ibec, Vicky conceptualised and launched a people experience service for members of EMA, part of the Business New Zealand network, Ibec's equivalent in New Zealand. She has also sat on the executive leadership team at APAC for a gold class S&P Fortune 500 technology company, leading programs of work such as culture transformation, sales enablement, and business continuity. She challenges the status quo to create better workplaces, work practices, and workforces. So, Vicky, I'm going to introduce you to allow you to do a better job than I did of introducing yourself and what you do.
Thank you so much, Barbara. That's a lot of pressure because you did a fantastic job. So thank you everyone for taking the time to be with us today. And I truly am humbled and honoured to be able to join this discussion and to be able to do the work that I do. So really I have a passion for supporting organisations across their people programmes, because I think, we spend so much time in the workplace, and work and lives are so intertwined now more than ever. We actually have a conscious responsibility as organisations to look after the people that work within our businesses, so we can live better lives and impact the economy and society. So really where my passion lies is working with businesses to help them understand the connection between things like well-being and employee engagement, and how that can enhance productivity and performance, but how it can also make a difference in the world. So thank you so much for giving me the time and space to be part of our panel today. I'm very excited.
Thanks so much. And again, it's wonderful to have the kind of experience that you have and a very different perspective. And it was one of the things that we really wanted to have in this conversation, that there's lots of different ideas coming into this, but all with the same purpose and outcome. So really looking forward to having a chat with you. So Audrey, I'm going to introduce you next. So hopefully I will do a better job and not get so tongue-tied. So, and looks like screen share is actually working for you. So Audrey says, I was born and raised in Kuala Lumpur and have called Ireland, Clare and Dublin home since the age of 16. Personally, I have passion for people and believe that a positive work environment and experience is fundamental to our everyday well-being. As a result of this, I thrive to make National Lottery a better place to work for our people, and do this by listening to their feedback and transforming them into improvement frameworks and projects. This includes leading well-being, diversity and inclusion, engagement and communications, with a focus on building and executing on a sustainable framework that puts our people at the heart of what we do. Equipped with a master's in organisational psychology from DCU, I focused on improving policies and processes while creating opportunities for staff to learn and be part of the company culture that supports a happy and satisfied workplace. My career journey began and grew over 5 years with DAA, where I led and managed numerous projects and work streams across HR, the CEO office and operations teams based in Dublin Airport. Audrey, you are very welcome. So if you'd like to tell us a little bit more and maybe do a better job of introducing yourself.
Again, I think you did a fantastic job there. So nothing more to add. I'm just saying that I'm absolutely honored to be on the panel, really excited to speak today and also hear from Brian and Vicky and yourself, just to even learn more in this space. I don't think it's a place where you are ever stagnant. We always learn something new about mental health, well-being. So yeah, just great to bring the perspective of the company to this panel, to see how we can encourage more people in different organizations to make their workplace better for their people.
That's wonderful. And you've shared a slide with us, so I'm going to share that for you. So you might talk a little bit about the wellbeing framework that you've mentioned. So I'm just going to put that up on the screen for everybody to have a look at. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit more insight into this.
Sure, thanks. So this is our wellbeing framework that we have developed over just in the past couple of months. And really, it's about putting people at the center. You'll see at the center there, you see a picture of each employee, their self, and that's surrounded by 5 different parts of their well-being. Mental being one of them, but not forgetting that physical, work, financial, and social all interact. They don't work in silos. But then we're here really as an organization to help support people's different elements of mental well-being and other well-beings as well. And that's then supported by 6 pillars. And the pillars really are the ones that help us to create a framework that makes this sustainable to move forward. First one is about strategic partnerships, such as with Sea Change, tying in with the experts, the charity organizations, the government organizations that are the experts in different realms of well-being, and making sure that we provide an overall framework for staff to get expert knowledge and support. Second is about educating and getting our staff to get engaged, participating in fun things or learning more about elements of well-being that they don't know. So we have a fantastic sports and social club where we organize different things every month, whether that be going for a hike. I think we're going to the Hell and Back in June, all sorts of things to just get people thinking about their own well-being, volunteering days, social events, well-being initiatives, and just information talks. For example, we had the Menopause Hub with us on Monday to teach us more about that. But making sure that people know that all of these things are there, because sometimes the mistake is that companies have lots on, but people don't know. So having that effective communication, we have a monthly well-being newsletter, and we have an intranet as well, with a full well-being section. But then we get the engagement then from employees. We have a survey, we have pulse surveys each year to make sure we know we're doing the right thing and getting feedback. And we have a recognition program for staff to recognize each other as well. We have supportive networks then internally. We have our mental health first aiders, our first aiders, fire wardens, and of course the HR team is always there to support for any needs for the managers or for staff. And last but not least, making sure that we are supported by strong policies, practices, and facilities in our company, that when things go wrong or when things are going well, that we have strong policies that make it clear that each person will get the same treatment and the same process to make sure that they feel that their well-being is taken care of. So yeah, whistle stop tour.
That's fantastic, Audrey. And I think it's so important, particularly the piece you mentioned about communication, because like the people not knowing about the events, the different things to attend, a lot of people don't realize the different policies, the procedures, and all the work that goes behind the scenes for a lot of organizations. And like that, there are a lot of groups that we would work with where the staff don't realize particular policies that are in place or how to access them. They don't know about the EAP program, so the employee assistance programs that they can engage with and get support from. So it's really important that we understand more about checking in with people and finding out how they need to access things and do they know what we're doing, because that can be a point of failure if we're doing all of this work but people are not using it and not engaging it. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's wonderful. So I'm going to move on lastly to Lucie Kavanagh. So Lucie has been with us quite a number of years as a Sea Change ambassador. So Lucie Kavanagh is currently living in Mayo, where she runs a pet boarding daycare service. She enjoys writing and has a big passion for animals and their welfare. Lucie is a former social care worker and is very keen to use her autism diagnosis and experiences around masking diagnosis and that kind of thing to help others if possible. So Lucie, would you like to just give a brief overview of why it's important to you today to be part of this conversation?
Sure. Yes. Hello, everyone. Yes, I had the experience in a past life of disclosing mental health difficulties in my workplace, where I had worked for kind of about 20 years, so had no qualms about sharing it, because I was kind of convinced that because I was so well known and the organization was in the caring sector, that there would be no problem. But unfortunately, there was then a sequence of events that led to me losing my job, and this having such a huge impact on me. And I think since then, I've spoken to people, with mental health difficulties, and one really common thread seems to be difficulties in the workplace, which really made me very determined to try and help if I could by, sharing my experiences or just adding to the conversation to make workplaces safer and more inclusive of people with mental health conditions.
That's fantastic. And I think it's so important that we do include that voice, because it makes it more human and it makes us realize why it's important to have these policies, why it's important to have the Work Well Ireland who are, providing some of the supports, why it's important to have all of the different people working together so that that kind of experience doesn't happen for people. or that if it does, that it can be rectified, because I know that it had a huge impact on your life. So thank you very much for sharing, and so courageous in doing that, because like we said, 7 in 10 people don't want to share. So it's wonderful to have your voice, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So I'm going to kick off, and Brian, I'm going to come to you first. So we're celebrating positive changes in the workplace, and looking at the impact that it's had to improve workplace culture when it comes to mental health particularly. So before we jump into the discussion, can you talk to me a little bit about what you consider mental health judgment in the workplace to look like?
Yeah, well, I think in your introduction, Barbara, you touched on it really. It's probably any comments, behaviours, actions, or maybe even lack of action towards someone, or maybe even towards a group that have either intentionally or unintentionally disclosed, some mental health challenges that they're facing. So it's those kind of behaviours, actions, comments, whatever the case may be, towards that person or those people. And maybe while we're talking about it, it might help to mention what I see as maybe the opposite of that. And I hope I'm not jumping ahead in your questions list, but I mean, if we can do something towards creating a psychologically safe or safer work environment, I mean, that's really the goal, where people can feel just a little bit more comfortable, maybe taking risks. They can certainly feel more comfortable in asking questions. They can express concerns, they can promote ideas, and of course, I think really importantly, they can admit mistakes then as well. All of that over a period of time. I mean, and by the way, without fear of negative consequences for all those actions. I mean, that's what we want to try and build and grow over time. And it's a process. It's cultural. It's something that we all need to work on. But I think that's the goal, what we should be kind of working towards.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really great point. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I think it's that piece about without fear, isn't it? Because quite often we know how to do these things when it comes to something else. So say if we had a tech issue, we would be much faster to go and ask for that support. And we would know, well, I need to go to this person, or maybe I could try these 5 different people. Whereas when we think about our mental health, we are more fearful in, what if I say the wrong thing to the wrong person, or what if I don't get the support I need? So I think that's a really, really strong point, and that piece about somebody feeling comfortable. So thanks a million for sharing that. So Lucie, I'm going to come to you now and ask if you could talk a little bit more about the experience that you mentioned earlier. So can you share about when you felt judged in a workplace for disclosing your mental health difficulty, particularly what the impact was on you?
Sure. Well, I disclosed to a manager who I'd known for a very long time that I had a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, and I was called into a meeting with my HR department nearly straight away, and the questions were very intrusive. And there was a comment made at that meeting. I have written about it a lot, but the comment was, "We've Googled it and it's not pretty." And that comment just had such an impact. I think it set the tone for everything that came after, because I found then I was seeing myself through those eyes, and I was kind of looking at people who had known me for years, but feeling that they were just seeing me through a completely different lens. And the immediate impact was that it made me very determined to prove myself and to prove that I hadn't changed. So I, started coming in very early for shifts, kind of doing way more of the workload than I needed to, or than I previously would have done. And this, of course, then in its turn started to lead to exhaustion and burnout. So it was a very vicious circle, but that original meeting just really set how the organisation viewed me, and it made it very, very difficult then to look for support or for help. Quite the opposite. I felt that I needed to show that I was just absolutely fine and had no difficulties.
I think that's a really helpful thing to be able to share for people to understand. Firstly, the impact of what we say, that seemingly throwaway comment, the massive impact that it had on you, and particularly then when you're thinking about going down the line, actually the negative consequences that came, this feeling of not feeling good enough, aside from whatever you were being challenged with your mental health at that time, you then had this feeling of, you know, inferiority and needing to prove yourself. So I think that's a really powerful thing for people to hear, to consider when we're talking to people. It's really important that we're compassionate in what we say and that we don't Google it, and that we hear from the person, what's that like, you know, and or even to have that to say, well, I Googled it and I'm sorry I did, because I should have spoken to you first about it, because I don't know what it's like for you. And I think that would have had a very different effect for you.
Very much so, yes. Yes, it's very much all in the way that somebody is responded to. But I think, as you say to somebody, how is that for you? Or, you know, what difficulties is it giving to you? Those kind of questions just directed at the individual would make all the difference.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for sharing that, Lucie. So Audrey, I'm going to come to you now, and I'd love to, you've talked about some of the examples, so I'd like to dig into that a little bit more. So can you share some of the examples that organisations in general can use to help improve the culture around mental health in the workplace?
I think it's multi-layered, you know, it needs change on several layers. So first of all is, what policies do you have in place to support well-being, to support mental health? Do you have, for example, an EAP? Do you have partnerships with other expert organizations? That's one level. The second is it safe to talk about it at work? You know, just as Lucie shared that she thought it was, and then suddenly she was met with the opposite reaction. And how we try to break down those barriers is, first of all, we have 24 mental health first aiders at work. And that's a lot for our staff. We have 200 something staff. So that's actually a decent population of our people. And some of them are our senior team. Our CEO, our CPO are on that. They are the mental health first aiders. And then just this week, for example, they and other colleagues were speaking about mental health, well-being in the workplace. Some of them shared very personal stories. And I hope that creates that psychological safety for other people in the workplace to know that if they can talk about it, so can I. But making sure that when they do speak about it, they're not met with that reaction that Lucie got, that our managers and our HR team are equipped to know how to manage those conversations. And that's going for training, understanding the terms, the up-to-date terms. You know, we can't rely on terms that we were used to maybe 15, 20 years ago, making sure that if you don't know whatever they're going through, that you ask them, or you look for credible resources, not just your Wikipedia pages. Yeah, so there's a combination of those things to hopefully create an environment at work where somebody can talk about it, and they feel that they will actually be valued and not be put down.
So I can hear really strongly that you're echoing what Lucie said there, but particularly that piece around the multi-layering, that it's about having the different steps so that you have the support in place as a manager or as a leader. But equally that piece around the leadership buy-in, that it's making it culturally safe and psychologically safe because we're leading by examples. That piece is really, really important. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really helpful for people to hear. So Vicky, I'm going to come to you next. And, you know, we want to think about in a hybrid and digital world of work, sometimes mental health can actually go unchecked. So what would you recommend in thinking about mitigating factors around the risk?
Sure. So our recent HR update survey actually demonstrated that about 60% of workplaces that are using hybrid are allowing employees to work from home 3 days per week, about 40% are 2 days per week. And so what we have at the moment is people coming into organizations that are relatively new to an organization, and they don't have as much interaction or connectivity with the people that they work with. And this is particularly challenging where you have intergenerational differences and people coming through the work stages at their early stage of their career. So it's really, really important that you're consciously curating opportunities to interact and making sure that those interactions are meaningful. Audrey mentioned before, you know, making sure that leaders have effective training and people have effective training within the workplace. The top three trends and areas for organizational focus for 2023 are organizational design and change management, leadership effectiveness, and employee experience. So change is not going anywhere. Hybrid, it's still evolving, but it's probably not going anywhere. And leaders need to be, I guess, upskilled on how to lead within an ambiguous world. So making sure that there are those conscious interventions as well for check-in conversations, and educating everyone on the risks and signs of burnout, fatigue, mental illness, what to do for themselves as well as what to do for others. So the highest risk of burnout in the workplace currently is at that middle management level, because often they're feeling that squeeze from the top and the bottom. And also, again, being conscious of that continuous change. So the Kubler-Ross model is particularly good when you're helping colleagues and people understand that everybody experiences change differently and at different stages. So moving through those different stages will resonate differently for people. And active listening is absolutely essential when you're having those check-in conversations. And I emphasize check-in conversations, not check-up, not how are you going with your to-do list today, but actually, how are you? And often I encourage leaders to use what I call the EMC squared formula. So empathize, validate feelings, reflect mood, acknowledge situations, motivate, ask open questions, be attentive, find common ground, clarify and confirm. So restate what the other person has said, use closed questions to check understanding, summarize and agree actions with employees. So making sure there's that real clarity of understanding, not just around performance and expectations, but around how one another are sort of doing in the workplace. Are we thriving, surviving, struggling, or in crisis? And having that sign posted everywhere so everyone understands what the signs are, and everyone understands that they have a forum to come forward into and to speak safely about it.
So you've mentioned a huge amount there. So I'm actually really glad that this is being recorded, that people can come back to that. But again, thinking about what you've said, what I loved there that you talked about consciously curating and conscious interventions. I think that's the difference between things happening ad hoc, that it's part of that procedure. So like Audrey was saying about happening at different levels, but there being a format and there being a process for it. I loved what you said as well about the education and awareness, and also the individual nature of things at different stages that people are going in, and particularly thinking about that interaction and engagement, particularly because we've all been thrown into this world of hybrid work. For a lot of people, they don't know how to do that in the social way, because it is really about being part of a group and identifying and belonging. So I think it's more important than ever that we really have that check-in. And I love that you lifted that out, because I think as managers, there's a lot of people who feel that it's the checkup we have to do. But actually, when we feel seen and heard, it's so much easier to have a discussion. And particularly thinking about if we've got something difficult going on, it'll be a hell of a lot easier to have that conversation if we know we're going to be heard. Thank you very much for that. So Brian, I want to come back to some of the work that you do in Workwell Ireland. So thinking about workplaces and what they should consider when they're implementing a mental health policy. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So with any kind of policy or any wellbeing initiative, I'd always encourage people and companies to start with your people first. So people first, understand needs and wants, but then also involve them in the process. From grassroots to senior leadership, involve them in the development of the policy, empower them to be involved in that, so that they get a feeling that this is their policy, as opposed to the organization's policy, which can feel miles away from them. So involve your people, and then you can start getting practical. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, Barbara, I think Sea Change have an excellent template out there that can be used, that can be downloaded there. So when we start with that, I'd also encourage companies, make sure you use your own, align what you're doing with your own company documentation process, align with that. That's really important as well. And then for really kind of detailed support and advice, you could look at something like ISO 45003, world's first global standard for psychosocial well-being in the workplace. There's a link there. I can get that for you. You can share that, but that's all free. That identifies psychosocial hazards. So it might not be a bad starting point, or maybe supporting your conversation that you're having with your people about what the psychosocial hazards are, and maybe inform yourself on that. It might be some of the language you could use in your policy documentation. But one policy is one thing, and it's really, really important to have that and to talk about that. But to Audrey's earlier point, we need leaders, we need people in the organization then leading by example, living and breathing this policy every single day. I mean, if I hear that my CEO and my CPO, they're not saying, oh, that mental health first aid training is for the staff. It's, I'm doing it, the CPO is doing it, it's our policy, it's our training, this is our mental health initiative. That makes it so much more inclusive, and this encourages everyone to get on board.
Absolutely, and I think that's such an important point, and I love, you know, the involve and empower. I think, again, thinking about being seen and heard, feeling empowered in your life is incredible, but getting that in your workplace. And it's one of the things that, you know, we've come to live in a very different way, that we need a lot more from smaller groups, whereas previously the way we lived as a community, we got different things from different areas, but we're expecting more from our relationships, and that includes the relationship with work. So it's wonderful to think that we actually have the capacity and the space to empower our staff and empower as a group and as a unit, rather than staff being separate. So I love that point that you picked out there. Thank you. Audrey, I'm going to come to you, just thinking about that, engaging with people. So thinking about the reluctance that people might have in joining some of these initiatives, getting involved in workplace workshops, or whatever the process. You mentioned about surveys and different things. So to Brian's point about that empowerment and inclusion, some people are fearful of being labelled or judged. So how, thinking about an employer, how can employers encourage their employees to participate in the mental health and wellbeing programs that organisations are providing?
I'd say two things. The first one, which I've alluded to already, is making sure that there's senior buy-in. So just for an example, before we went out with the Sea Change Manager workshops to managers, we made sure that the senior team had gone through it first, so that when we announced it to the company, it wasn't like, this is the first time we're doing it. It's actually, the senior team have done it. And now we're opening it up to all the other managers who would like to take part as well. So they know that they allocated that half day to get trained. And it would be acceptable to then say, yeah, I'm going to go for it and take the half day and get trained as well. So making sure that it's cascaded through that way. And the second thing is to make well-being and mental health fun. I think sometimes it can be a very negative topic. The people hear mental health and they're like, oh, that means problems. So we try our best to make sure that being healthy, being mentally well it's a fun thing. And we don't forget that all our social experiences, how we are in our team, our work, our finances, everything will impact our mental health if they're not well. So we come up with, for example, fun challenges like this month for workplace wellbeing. We put a focus on 6 different challenges that people could take up throughout the month. That was 50K walk or run, 200K cycle, yoga classes for the month. If you did all 4, you have to go to all 4, or giving up alcohol for the month. And today and later at lunchtime, we have a planking challenge, just for the crack, so that people get engaged. They see their colleagues from all levels, getting into this well-being thing, that it stops being a separate part of their life, and they realize, like, look, this is actually my own well-being, and maybe it'd be good for me to go to one of these, and to make sure there's variety, because sometimes I hate running, and I would not put myself up to do that run, but I'd go for the yoga classes, for example. So just to give that variety to people that might work for them.
I think that's an absolutely fantastic point, and it's one of the things I have agreed to go to Brian's walk tomorrow, but I've actually agreed to go. I didn't agree to walk because I have a problem with my hip at the moment, so I usually walk a lot, but at the moment it doesn't work. So I think that piece, again, to echo what we've heard now multiple times, this individual nature and offering different things is important. But I could see Lucie nodding there with the the recognition of mental health is more than just the bad. So I love that you picked that out. And Lucie, I want to come back to you, just thinking about that and thinking about the situation that you've mentioned earlier on. What could have been done differently that would have been more supportive and approaching things you know, thinking about diversity and inclusion and thinking about how things could have been better for you. So if things had been handled differently, what might that have looked like?
Well, I think it would have had an awful lot to do with kind of the overall culture of the workplace, and even just listening to Brian and Audrey there, the organisation itself was very split between senior management and the rest of the organisation, which has come back to haunt them in different ways. But in my situation, it led to this very closed culture and atmosphere, which you know, looking back now, I can actually see that maybe the response to me probably shouldn't have been as shocking as it was. But I think in general, had there been more awareness throughout the organisation, like more discussions, awareness days, information sessions, like we worked in an organisation where there was a very high risk of, you know, vicarious trauma, burnout. You know, we were doing shift work, we were often working alone, a caring profession. So information on all of those things would have helped everyone, not just people who, you know, had mental health difficulties. I think it would have contributed to the overall wellness of people in the organisation. And the other thing I think that would have helped would have been to have maybe a designated person or people in the organisation to actually go to and talk to about my situation and maybe receive, you know, just some advice. I think especially where people are off sick, it's really important to have a link back to the organisation, and just to feel that, you know, you're still part of the organisation, you're not forgotten about. I was put on sick leave and told not to contact anyone in the organisation, which, you know, made me feel very, very cut off. Whereas I think, you know, just being able to maintain that link in some way would have helped an awful lot.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing that. I think it's really powerful to hear, you know, and obviously, I suppose, quite upsetting to imagine what that must have been like for you on a human level. And thinking about some of the positives that we're hearing from Brian and Audrey, you know, I'm thinking about the difference and the huge gap between the experience that you've had and what we've heard about from National Lottery today about all of those things and all of the different work that, you know, that Brian offers through his different programs for organizations to sign up to, and the work that Vicky has done and recommends as well. So it's amazing to think that we are starting to move in the right direction. But I would really hope that more organizations can hear this message and understand that no matter where they're at, they can do that linking in bit, they can do the human bit. It doesn't cost any money. And actually, it probably is costing them, because by not having the conversation, you're then feeling more separate, you're more likely to stay out longer, you're more likely to possibly not even return. And as has happened to you, you've had a really negative experience with that. So even turning it around and saying there is a cost to kindness. Kindness actually gives us a huge benefit, whereas, you know, having that gap is a real negative towards the business, aside from what we've already discovered about the impact on a single person as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. So Brian, I want to come back to you, just thinking about some of those things that we're talking about and thinking about the benefits of workplaces and running mental health programs and wellbeing programs. So you can talk to us a little bit about some of the benefits that you see of organizations getting involved.
Sure, yeah, the first thing to say is benefits, yes, if there's a consistent approach, a consistent strategy around these programs and trainings. The one and done, you might get a very short-term hit, I suppose, benefit, but that's really ultimately not going to lead to anything. In one training program, we have an EAP. The CEO said, "That's it. You know, we're done with mental health. We've ticked that box. So now everybody back to work, please." But if you are actually only looking at that, similar to the way Audrey was speaking there, the mental health first aid, an excellent program, but is only a 2-day program. I mean, that's the start of your journey, really, and the learning for those individuals. That consistent approach to training, to education, to learning, to sharing, and there's consistent programs across the organization. I mean, the benefits are huge. You're working towards what I see as the ultimate goal for organization, and that's a culture of health. And a huge part of that is, of course, the psychologically safe work environment that we're talking about. I mean, so if people feel supported at work, if they feel like they can trust their employer and vice versa, look, they're happier, there's greater teamwork, there's more morale and camaraderie, and look, they're just more productive, plain and simple. So it improves the bottom line for the organization. The individuals feel stronger, more supported, able to have open conversations. I mean, the benefits are numerous.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? It really is. It's so expansive that we still don't know enough about the positive benefits that organizations see, aside from the personal benefits. Because again, thinking about Lucie's story, had she had any of those things in place, I'd imagine the impact on her life would have been very different, you know. And to think about what Audrey was saying about approaching mental health in a fun way and understanding that it changes and that mental health and well-being are the same thing, that, you know, they do impact. So I think it's great to hear that approach, and helping organizations realize that it isn't a tick the box, it isn't a, you know, something to be on the agenda, and once it's off the agenda, that's it, finished. So it's really important to keep it alive. So thank you very much for lifting that out. So Vicky, I just want to come back to you thinking about the workplace trends you mentioned earlier on. So I want to just ask you if there's any other trends or anything else that you want to focus on that organizations should be aware of that could positively or negatively impact workplace well-being.
Sure, absolutely. And I think so. One of the things that continuously comes up with our members at the moment is actually around the use of technology when it comes to attracting, retaining, and including people in the workforce. And I think that is a trend that can supercharge diversity and inclusion, which will contribute to psychological safety, but it comes with some risks as well. And it's probably worth noting, as an expansion of what Brian's mentioned, you know, there are 4 levels to psychological safety in the workplace. So you've got inclusion safety, which is the first level. Then you've got learner safety, contributor safety, and challenger safety. So to really move up those levels, it's important that we're making sure that we're consulting with employees in the workplace around some of these policies, practices, and programs. So what we saw in the rise of hybrid was a massive increase in various different demographics in the workplace. So for example, the 2022 European Commission report on Ireland suggested the number of women working or looking for work, and their participation reached an all-time high at 72%. We also saw that working from home created new opportunities for reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities, which led to a lot more autonomy, it led to a lot more control, and in some cases, people with disability reporting greater connectedness with colleagues. On the flip side of that, what we actually saw was a much higher correlation between social isolation and minorities if they were not consulted with, and if they were not psychologically safe enough to come forward and actually communicate with their employer around different interventions or supports that were needed for some of those remote work arrangements. Now, I mentioned technology and AI before as a trend. So we're definitely seeing a rise in chat GPT. So organizations using chat to generate relevant interview questions, to onboard people, to give people employee self-serve, to help with performance reviews, and businesses getting smarter using AI to enhance quality and productivity. So some of that's really positive. However, we're also seeing the negative impacts of that, where pre-programmed biases and today's stereotypes are being built into technology for tomorrow. So what that could do in terms of mental health impact is start socially isolating certain minority groups, and the different algorithms that are programmed in there could actually weed people out of that diverse pool of talent that we could have access to. So I think that's going to be a developing feast, and I think it's really important if organizations are using that tech to enable their workplaces, that they're very conscious of the potential detrimental impacts around diversity and inclusion, which will ultimately lead to better psychological safety in the workplace if done effectively.
Absolutely fantastic. And again, there's a number of different points that you've mentioned there. And again, echoing what's been said across the entire panel today, a piece around really being inclusive and not doing things without people. So it's a matter of doing them with them rather than to them. So I think that's a really, really powerful piece. And especially, as you say, there's so much changing in tech So to know what it is that we're doing and to consider that piece about bias, because it's one of the things in the work that we do in Sea Change and really considering stigma. People aren't aware of their unconscious bias. And so in that way, if we're not aware of it, how can we be aware of what we're programming? So then obviously thinking about the impact of that is really important. So thank you for bringing that to our attention as well. Lucie, I want to come back to you and just ask, when we're thinking about mental health judgment in the workplace, what can we all do to individually engage with that? So what can we do individually to prevent mental health judgment in the workplace?
Well, again, I think, it was a very good point you raised earlier, that it's kind of that it can be up to everybody. I mean, it's really important, I think, that say managers and HR departments have that awareness and, you know, are very up to date with, like, even things like terminology and able to ask the right questions. But I think everybody in an organization can add to the culture of that organization, and I think, you know, the more awareness and information that there is, the better. I think you know, that sometimes the smallest accommodations could help somebody who's struggling, like it could be something just as straightforward as maybe a little bit of time out when needed, or, you know, maybe agreements around sick leave, or even just the working from home option, or in my case, you know, even maybe a period of time of stepping away from shift work. You know, there just can be ways that that workplaces could accommodate people just to support them through difficult times. And I think the other kind of important thing is, when you are struggling with a mental health condition and mentally unwell, you are very, very vulnerable, and your self-esteem and self-confidence is so low. And sometimes I look back now and I kind of think, why didn't I talk to my union, or why didn't I go to the EAP? And even some of my colleagues have kind of said, you know, oh, I didn't realize what was happening. Why didn't you tell us, or why didn't you speak to us? But I just, the whole overwhelm and vulnerability of the situation just made it very, very hard to talk about it or to reach out. So I think, just going back to the point about maybe a mentor or somebody who's designated in an organization that could actually sit with you and kind of say, look, you need to take someone to that meeting with you. It just could be the simplest things. Could I just sit in on this meeting and just make sure you're treated fairly? Just somebody to make sure that if you are finding it hard to look out for your own needs and interests, that somebody might be just keeping an eye and making sure that you're treated fairly.
Thanks, Lucie. So I think what I'm really hearing there is the human connection and taking the time, and like Vicky said, to check in and what is it you need, tell me about that, and the small elements of support, and making sure that we understand from the person's perspective. And particularly, again, going back to what Audrey said about mental health first aiders and the different points of contacts that they have the opportunity. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that, and I hope that that's helpful to everybody listening. Audrey, I want to just come back to you and just ask, is there anything that you can share that what managers can do to help support employees with mental health difficulties or illnesses? So as we're coming to the end, just thinking about signposting that you can do for organizations here.
I'd say the first thing is what you have just been talking about, is the first time somebody approaches you about their mental health, don't go into problem solving, you know, just sit there and listen and fully understand, clarify, so that you can completely know to your best extent what this person is going through. And then go away and say, I'll go do my own research, understand what the company policies are. What do you actually have access to in your company? What supports, what initiatives? And then bring that information back to your team member, saying, like, I've listened to you and I found out HR got to understand all the policies that are there to support you. What out of these can actually help you then? And then you can go into the problem solving space, so that it allows the person to just get everything off their chest, and you're not assuming what they need either. But it's always good to keep informed of what is at your fingertips. I think managers don't realize what they do have. And if you're going to offer something like call the EAP. Call the EAP yourself first, so you know what the process is going to be like. You know, who are they going to speak to first, so you can say like, oh, you won't actually talk to a counselor straight away. You get through to a triage person. They'll ask for X, Y, and Z, and then they'll make an appointment for you in the next 48 hours. Just even being able to tell your team member that that's the process. Don't feel daunted. I did it too. You know, just small things like that might help your team member to take the next step.
That's fantastic. So again, we're hearing that human approach, and I think that piece of preparing, you know, and being ready and having the information is really, really helpful. So thank you very much for sharing that, Audrey. So Brian, I want to come to you just for final signposting. So where can people go to find out more information about mental health and well-being in the workplace that you're aware of?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much out there, so much material, so many resources that it can actually be overwhelming. So in the interests of avoiding overwhelm, I will signpost everyone on the call to the single best resource in Ireland for mental health and wellbeing in the workplace, and that is seechange.ie. So if everyone wants to check out that website, I mean, in all seriousness, it's Ireland's National Stigma Reduction Partnership, not for profit, completely impartial. If SeeChange can help you with whatever you're looking for, I'm sure they will. If they cannot, they will also signpost you to maybe you or your organization to better supports. Is that Mental Health First Aid Ireland? Is that some other organization? So absolutely start with SeeChange and then take it from there.
Thank you, Brian. Absolutely shameless plug, really appreciate it. And very much we do signpost to other organisations. So like that, we would have a list, including Workwell Ireland. But there are a huge amount of organisations that do offer free and some paid supports, and including the HSE, they do the resilience training, the Safe Talk, the Assist. So there is an absolutely massive amount available both online and in person. So thank you for sharing that. So Vicky, I'm going to come to you last and just see, is there any other supports that you can signpost to help in ending mental health judgment in the workplace that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think we've shared so much knowledge today. It's been really educational, even for myself. For practices and policies to be sustainable, the framework that you put behind it is really, really important. And Brian mentioned one of the frameworks, the ISO standard, before. So, if there are people on the call that are Ibec members, I can, as can the team, help you understand some of those frameworks around, making sure that you have a systematic approach to workplace, work design. Take work design, for example. Do employees have clear duties, responsibilities, space for consultation when you consider how work is managed? Do they have access to information systems of work? And then the workplace and social engagement element as well. So we at Ibec do have a guide for managers on our employer hub around workplace wellbeing, and that was designed by Dr. Cara, our head of social policy, in conjunction with a number of partners. We also have a mental health policy available, and then obviously our knowledge centre team is here to support with anyone that does have any queries around more of that HR org design framework side of things when it comes to really effectively managing people in the workplace, or potentially some of those legal implications and risks that are there as well.
Really appreciate, thank you so much. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to share our last slides and just follow up. I'm going to also ask if people wouldn't mind following the link that's now going to be put into the chat in relation to a feedback form. We'd really love to hear how you found this event today. So just mentioning some of those supports there. There's also Mental Health First Aid Ireland, and we've mentioned Ibec, the Workwell community, Chine and SeeChange, our own organisation, and in addition to that, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission as well. So following on from that, you also have a huge range of the different guides and things that I've mentioned earlier, and obviously our workplace programme as well, which is funded by the National Office of Suicide Prevention. So lastly, thank you so much for joining us. If you wouldn't mind, please do give us feedback. You can scan the QR code that's on the screen now, or you can check on the chat box and link there. Thank you so much, Audrey, Vicky, Brian and Lucie. It's been fantastic to talk to you. I hope you enjoy the playback. I'm sorry we didn't have more time, but I'm delighted that we've had such a rounded conversation, and I hope that it was really helpful and beneficial to everybody who joined us. To everybody who's on the call today, thinking about your own workplace well-being, take a break, take a couple of minutes, get a glass of water, get a bit of fresh air, consider joining Brian and I tomorrow, and that's Work Well Ireland. You'll get more information on that. Do you want to give a shout to where the link will be, Brian?
Yeah, go to workwellireland.ie or follow me on social media, Workwell Community. There's a link to register. It's a walk and talk in the Phoenix Park. So if it's close to you or even not that close, it's an early start, 7:30 a.m. You can sign up. It'll be more conversation and fresh air than you can shake a stick at tomorrow morning. So if you want to keep the conversation going, please do come. And maybe even look, if it's not your thing, come straight to the after party, like Barbara, in the Hole in the Wall from about 8:30 a.m. We'd love to see you there. There'll be porridge and fruit. So nice way to start your workplace wellbeing day.
Thanks so much. So to everybody who's on the call, the slides and all the information shared today will be in the follow-up email. We thank you so very much, and we hope you have a wonderful workplace wellbeing day tomorrow and a great weekend ahead. And to all of our panelists, thanks again. We really appreciated the conversation today.
Thanks.